Question number 3 in the name of Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Ken Corlin. Continuing on the same theme, my question is in relation to the fact that there was misleading information and misinformation that led to your predecessor signing the consent order. So in view of that, the question is, will you put a freeze on that so that there can be a proper, independent, comprehensive assessment of the battlefield site?
Thank you. Minister.
I do not accept the suggestion that the decision made by my predecessor was based on misleading or inaccurate information. As indicated in previous replies, revised designs submitted by the owners for the restoration of the National Monument buildings at numbers 14 to 17 Moore Street and the creation of a commemorative centre to the leaders of the 1916 Rising on the site were approved by my predecessor on the 30th of April 2014. The granting of the consent followed detailed consideration and appraisal of all the relevant factors, including a formal environmental impact assessment. A comprehensive assessment of the wider area was also produced as part of the consent process, and full account was taken of it in the Department's decision. The methodology for the assessment was drawn up and agreed in advance by my Department National Monument Services and by the Director of the National Museum of Ireland. And the assessment, as I said earlier, was carried out by an eminent archaeologist and historian, and my department is satisfied with the quality of the research. And I do not propose to seek a further assessment of the area. I am satisfied that the determination made on the consent application was not in any way influenced by misleading or inaccurate information, and my department has made this clear in writing in reply to correspondence on the matter, including to Dublin City Council. And as I said, I recently visited the monument myself. I have been through the entire site, and again during the visit I spoke to a number of the Moore Street traders, and they are very anxious that this development should go ahead. And indeed they said to me, can you please do something? We want this development to go ahead. We want this area needs to be redeveloped, and my role in this is to protecting of the national monuments, and the decision on that, I said to them, still stays with Dublin City Council. I've also offered meetings to both of the 1916 Moore Street relatives groups next week, and expect to discuss the plans for the national monument with them. However, it's important to note that advancement of the project, which itself relates to a previous grant of plan and permission, is a matter for the owners to progress in consultation with Dublin City Council.
Deputy O'Sullivan.
Thank you. Minister, nobody disagrees with the development of the area, because it has been a derelict, abandoned site and an absolute disgrace to all of the governments who have been in existence here since 1916 or since after the Civil War. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But the whole point is that the whole area is a monument, and other buildings on that street, apart from 14 to 17, have been identified in the Miles Battlefield Report as having a significance with the events of the Rising. For example, O'Brien's Mineral Water Building in Henry Place was occupied by the Volunteers. The White House on Henry Place was occupied and held by Michael Collins. Cogan's in number 10 Moore Street was where the first Council of War, where their overnight stay was. The bottling stores were occupied by Frank Henderson. Hanlon's at 20 and 21 Moore Street, that's where the surrender order was accepted by the Volunteers after consultation with Tom Clark, Joseph Plunkett and Sean McDermott. So there are other buildings on that street of historical significance, and your consent order will see those obliterated. Now, I'm totally with the traders and the street trading tradition, but they can also be facilitated with an appropriate development, bearing in mind the historic significance of the street. It doesn't have to be a sprawling, massive shopping centre in the middle of quite a number of other shopping centres.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have to reiterate again, the fact is a comprehensive assessment has already been carried out by at my department's request as part of the consent application under the National Monuments Act for the proposed works on the National Monument site. The consent applicants, Chartered Land Limited, who own the National Monument site, were asked by my department in January 2012 to commission an assessment of the wider battlefield context of the National Monument as part of the Minister's consideration of the consent application. The report reinforces the primary status of numbers 14 to 17 Moore Street, most notably because of the degree to which pre-1916 fabric survives, in association with the final critical hour of the rising and how these buildings stand in contrast with the wider area. The methodology for the assessment was drawn up and agreed in advance by my department's National Monument Service and by Director of the National Museum of Ireland. So it has been assessed, Deputy, and there are no plans to have it reassessed, and it was done by experts in the field, and the reports are on the record. So on that basis, there are no plans to have it reassessed.
Deputy O'Sullivan.
Minister, I'm saying that that comprehensive assessment was flawed, and before more mistakes are added to the ones that have already been made in that area, I think somebody has to call halt to this at the moment before the mistakes are further compounded. You're going to meet the relatives. I would ask that you would do the tour of the whole battlefield site with the relatives, and that you would listen to the stories of the events that took place at every step along that walk, from the GPO right down to the rotunda where the surrender, where the photograph of the surrender is of Padraig Pearse. And the other thing I would ask is that you would meet the city manager, because somebody has to take responsibility for this. It's great that there's money going into the GPO and into the courthouse at Kilmainham, but this is an extremely important site and we are in danger of losing it. And there is so much potential for that area in terms of business, in terms of housing. Moore Street was a city where people lived, and it's derelict now, and we know there's a housing crisis, and there's potential there along that street. Preserve the historical aspects and use it for housing also.
Minister.
Thank you. Well, I have already met members of the Dublin City Council, the members that the subcommittee that deals with the Moore Street issue. I have already met them, and I have to say that I do not feel that the assessment is flawed. The department is satisfied that there is no basis to the suggestions that the previous minister was misinformed or had inaccurate information when making his decisions on consents granted under the National Monuments Acts in relation to the National Monument on Moore Street. And in relation to numbers 13, 18 and 19, my department has dealt comprehensively with related correspondence received from the relatives' solicitor, and it was pointed out that these buildings are outside the bounds of the preservation order covering the national monuments numbers 14 to 17, and that the requirements for the ministerial consent to cater for their demolition only arises insofar as the demolition works constitute ground disturbance in proximity to the monument that might impact on the monument itself.